Hello coders, it's Caro, and I've been working as a software engineer at Canva for 3 years now. In today's video, I'm going to tell you exactly how I made my decision about not joining Microsoft or Google and chose a startup called Canva instead. I will explain how a company's size and mission and purpose influence my decision, what are the opportunities for growth in each of those companies, how I considered location when making my decision, pros and cons of each city, as well as cost of living. I will go through my offers in terms of total compensation, which is a base salary, performance bonus, stocks or options, and all the other benefits included. I will tell you how I made my decision based on each of those categories and which one of them the most important in my decision-making process. So all that information is just one click away. Click that like button and we'll get straight into it. So I don't think I need to explain what Google or Microsoft is doing and what those companies are. If you clicked into this video, you probably already know that. But for those who are not familiar with Canva, Canva is a drag and drop online design platform that is trying to make design accessible to everyone. At the time of me making the decision, Canva was still a small startup of around 150 employees. As you can see in this article, Canva is now valued at $8.6 billion US. Also, why is this quality so bad? Let's start with just a little bit of background. I got my full-time offer to join Microsoft as a software engineer after my internship in 2016. I was supposed to join in around the 1 year time because I still wanted to finish my master's and I had around a year left. At the same time, I had kind of a back and forth weird relationship with Google. When I wanted to join, they didn't want me. Then they wanted me, I didn't want to join anymore. I changed my mind a lot of times, and if I wanted to tell you the whole story, this video would probably take like an hour, so I will most probably create another video talking about my weird relationship with Google. But yes, it's complicated. So 2 months before I was supposed to start at Microsoft, Canva contacted me. I don't usually reply to those messages from LinkedIn. I mean, I reply saying,
"Hello, thank you for reaching out. I'm not interested. I already have an offer signed and I'm going to work for Microsoft. Let's stay in touch in case anything changes in the future."
But this message was so cool that I just couldn't leave it alone in the same way. So Diana, the recruiter who specializes in finding mobile engineers, Android or iOS, contacted me via LinkedIn. She literally sent me a link to a website with like top 50 things about Sydney, and there were just photos of beaches and food. There was not much about Canva itself, but she did say at the end of the message to let her know if I'm interested and we can have a chat. So I did actually decide to schedule a call with her. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I can just learn more about the opportunity, and if I still decide to stay at Microsoft, I can just say, hey, just let me know in a year time and we'll see where I am. But Diana was just so convincing. Like, the main thing I still remember, that I still have in my head after all those years, is when she said, "Microsoft, we have a climbing wall." And at that time, I loved climbing. Like, I would climb 5 times a week for the past 6 years. So that was a really good incentive for me, especially that the Oslo climbing walls were just like not that good. Everything about this offer was right. The location, the domain, like the work I would actually be doing, the technology, the company's size, and the fact that they have female CEO. I decided to give it a try. So I applied for a position of an Android engineer writing in native technologies, so Kotlin and Java. This interviewing style is so much different to what I was used to, because as you might know, big tech companies, FAANG, they interview you mostly on algorithmics, data structure, very abstract problems. While what Canva is doing, they give you problems that they work on every day. If you interview as an Android engineer, you will actually create a challenge that is an Android app. And during your coding interview, you will be actually working in the Android studio, running your real app, working with the technologies and patterns they are using every day. The whole interview consists of 3 parts: a challenge, also known as homework, the UI coding part, and the architecture coding part. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like me to talk more about the interviewing at Canva, also about the different styles of interviews and which one I find better. And I made it! After the last part of the interview, the next day after that, I got an official email from the CEO of Canva, Cliff, with the offer letter congratulating me. I was super excited, but then I had 2 offers to compare, and I actually had to make my decision. So it's a very difficult decision because on one hand you have Microsoft, which is a big tech company, very recognizable name, dream of many people to join and work for them. On the other hand, you have Canva, which is a small startup, not yet made its name in the tech world, but it has a really interesting proposition. It's really exciting to work for. So let me take you step by step through the process that led me to rejecting Microsoft and choosing Canva instead. Let's start with company's domain, or the things I would be working on. At Microsoft, you can potentially work on anything you want. They have offices all around the world doing any kind of programming. But my offer was specifically for Oslo in Norway, which means I would be working on the profile cards that you can see within your Outlook or in Microsoft Office, and the technology wouldn't be a native technology. Also, I already worked there and I knew it wasn't my calling. It wasn't something I was overly excited about. On the other hand, you have Canva, which is an online design tool. I used to love digital painting. I used to do a lot of UI design, and I kind of wanted to work for Adobe at some point. Another part of it is that I would be working on a native Android code, which is my favorite thing ever. The other part I considered is the company's size. We all know that Microsoft is massive, and Canva at the time had around 150, maybe 200 employees, probably less than 50 engineers. I personally prefer small companies because I can feel like I can have a lot of direct impact and can also drive what I want to work on, comparing to being just a small cog in a huge machine like Microsoft or Google. Also, Canva has a strong female CEO that I could potentially interact much closer with, which would be impossible at Microsoft. And even though Canva is a much smaller company, after taking the interviews, I could already see how smart all of the people are, how good the code quality must be, how much they take care of the architecture, of testing. I knew that there's a lot I can learn from them. And that also leads us to the opportunities for growth. Microsoft, it seems like the possibilities are endless. There are offices all around the Europe and all around the US that you can transfer to, and internal transfers are not that rare. It allows you to work at almost anything. You can work on the operating system, you can work on pretty much anything within the Microsoft Office, or if you're lucky enough, you can work on the Xbox software. At Canva, I would have much bigger impact and potentially much more control on what I'm working on. There's another aspect of it. I love people and I love working with people. And I always knew that eventually I would like to become an engineering manager. And that's where the things get complicated. At Microsoft, there's a very rigid structure around how you can become a manager. You need to spend at least 5 years to become a senior engineer, which is kind of like the entry position to then become a manager. I talked with a lot of my friends at Microsoft and they said that 5 years is really a minimum and they don't really know many people who managed to do that. On the other hand, with Canva being a startup and being a small company, I knew that there will be many more opportunities for me to showcase my leadership skills and eventually become a manager much faster, which I can tell you now from the 3-year smart perspective is true. In my opinion, the sooner you get the experience, the better. If I was waiting 5 years or longer to try my strengths as a people leader and then realized I hated it, that would be really bad. So that was definitely something very important for me, to have the quick path to a people leadership position. Another very important aspect that I consider was the location. My Microsoft offer was for Oslo in Norway, and my Canva offer was for Sydney in Australia. Both cities are very different, with distinct pros and cons and very different cost of living. Let's start with the Microsoft offer in Oslo. First very important thing is that it's just 1 hour flight from Poland, where all my families and friends are. The second one is that I already lived there for half a year, so I had all of the banks set up, all of the ID numbers, I already knew a lot about living in Norway and how to manage all the admin stuff there. But at the same time, this is the bad thing, because I already lived there for half a year, so it's kind of boring, and I'm a pretty curious person. I like exploring and I like learning new things and living in new places. Pretty much a deal breaker for me, it's cold and there's not much sun there. During the winter periods, the sun is out for around 3 hours a day, and you can see it if you're really, really lucky because it's usually far behind the clouds. Another problem is that I don't know the native language. I don't know Norwegian, and learning it would take me a long while. And it's really hard to make friends if you don't know Norwegian and if you actually don't speak fluent Norwegian. And one last thing is it's really hard to get the citizenship there, but that might not apply to everyone. Now let's talk about the Canva offer in Sydney. The most important thing and the polar opposite of Oslo is the weather. It's beautiful, it's hot. You can wear shorts the whole year round. There are tens of beaches around the city you can choose from. A lot of amazing surfing places. Also food. There's so many expats in Australia that you can get any cuisine you want. And specifically there's a lot of Asian cuisine here, which is my favorite one. Also English is the native language here, which is really important because I already know it. So it's so much easier to create new relationship and just navigate the city. People are super warm and open, and making new friends is so easy and so much fun. It's also much easier to get a citizenship. I'm seeing some of that from my experience, but before I joined, I actually just researched, read a lot of forums, watched some YouTube videos from expats talking about Australia. So now the bad things. Travel time to go back home and visit my family. The shortest total travel time is probably around 25-26 hours, so you can count on maybe around one visit home a year. Plus, everything wants to kill you. Spiders, snakes, snails. Let's talk about the cost of living. Whenever I consider an offer in another city, I usually like to know what's the cost of living there. How much do I pay for rent? How much do I pay for going out to a restaurant? How much does groceries or transport cost? So in this case, I use this website Numbeo. You can pick the cities you want to compare. Let's put Sydney, Australia, and Oslo, Norway. Compare. So here you can see a summary which says, in that case, consumer prices in Oslo are 20% higher than in Sydney. Then rent is actually lower than in Sydney. Restaurant prices are higher, groceries are higher, and local purchasing power is lower. You can go into details and even see how much coffee costs or milk or public transport as well. That's important if you're not planning to drive, or you can have a look at a petrol if you are planning to drive. So now that we are talking about the cost of living, it's important to talk about the monetary offers I got. I will present you my total compensation in both cases. That would consist of a salary, bonus, any relocation budget or stocks. For Microsoft, the base yearly salary would be 550,000 NOK, which is around 85,000 Australian dollars. I also got a stocks package, which was 20,000 US dollars, vesting over 4 years. I also got offered a relocation package, which was 10,000 NOK, which is around 3,000 Australian dollars. There was also an option for a performance bonus, which is from 0 to 20%, with around 5 to 15% on average. Microsoft also provided a really good medical insurance cover. In terms of Canva, my base salary on the offer was 120,000 Australian dollars with 9.5% superannuation on top of that. This is like a retirement fund, which brings it all together to around $131,000. So I just talked to legal department at Canva just to make sure that whatever I want to say here, I'm allowed to say. And because Canva is a private company, I wouldn't want to go too much into details around the stock option package I got. But just as a side note, whenever you take an offer from a company that's not trading publicly and you can't tell what the stock options are really worth, make sure that the base salary will allow you to live comfortably and that the mission of the startup is something you believe in and something that you believe that will succeed, but don't necessarily assign any value to the particular stock options you're getting. Understanding the difference between stock options and actual stocks is very important when considering your offers, so I will make sure to make a video about that in the future as well. Canva also offered a relocation package of $10,000. Just the basic salary, the basic annual salary I would get at Canva was more than the whole total compensation at Microsoft. So now you can see that even though living in Sydney is cheaper than living in Oslo, the total compensation in Sydney is actually much higher than the one in Oslo, which is interesting considering that Microsoft is such a huge company and Canva is just an upcoming startup. So how did I make my decision about which offer to choose based on all of those things I listed for you before? Well, it's not difficult to see that Canva's offer was just so much better for me personally. The whole aspect of Australian culture and the environment being so much more aligned with what I like, the warm weather, open people, the beach lifestyle, all of that. When we look at the compensation versus the cost of living, Canvas offers a clear winner. Something I didn't mention before is that the Microsoft internship experience already gave me a huge boost in terms of receiving job offers, and I didn't really expect the full-time position on my CV to make much difference at this point. However, having a diversification and some other company with a good name would actually do the trick. But to be honest, the main reason why I chose Canva over Microsoft is because Canva is a company I truly believe in. And I'm telling you this after 3 years working there, so I think it really means something. The mission to empower everyone to design, the fact that I will be working in the technology I love on a tool I would be happy to use myself, and the potential that I can have a significant impact on the work I'm doing and on the whole company, those things just spoke so deeply to my internal values that I just knew what I had to do. And then came the time to break the contract with Microsoft. Yo, thank you so much for watching. Apologies that I didn't talk about Google more, but this video would be way too long if I did. Make sure to click that subscribe button and this notification bell, and I will make sure to make a video about Google and our weird relationship in the future.